craftsman how to draw pretty pictures, right? I said, well, if you're going to have this technology and share it upon the world, you must know how to draw. How do you draw? I don't know. Go to sleep one night. Remember all those nice automatic drawings?
Yeah.
That used to amaze me myself. Wake up in the morning. You know, it's like you got a good night's sleep. Actually, I'm up all night long drawing pretty pictures.
Yeah, you were never tired. But let's pick it up right where you were at and just go to.
Is this going to bother your? You want to take a break in between here? Where were we?
Let's just pick it up where.
Sniff.
It was over, and let's go to. The success. They did say however, in that last thing, they did say there was success. Talk about the success side of it, and then you could go into your career a little bit and just summarize maybe where you worked or your jobs and how you took on responsibility. Okay, ready? Action.
Well, let's see. I guess we're still at the place of the whole, because you have to have a place for all this to end. They did not only have it end, and sort of, in a weird way, when the rock was glowing and the sounds that were there, you could feel your mind kind of being sucked into it. You know, your attention was really focused on what they had to say and what was going on with this rock thing. But you knew something was going on. You know, at least enough that maybe it would be a blessing in the end if you didn't have to worry about all this stuff 10 years down the road. You know, but they did thank us. You know, we got a lot of thank yous out of this thing, which was rather different, that for what we did do was really a success. They were very happy with that part of it. Well, the NOR, the one machine that we did come up with was like a forerunner of a bio-cybernetic type of a future with language and ways of doing things with just light and sound to communicate in a different way, to try to put something like this out there. Maybe it was a little bit ahead of its time, you know, for what we did do with it. We were, I guess, very lucky that it got where it had to get to, because this was something that was with the Easter Seal Society for a long time, and they were using the machine with children who couldn't hear, couldn't talk, couldn't speak, people who were deaf, people who had all kind of physical problems, and they were able to take children who, because they couldn't hear, had no idea if they were talking loud or soft. They had no idea, but in a couple, weeks, actually teach them to communicate at a certain level. And Easter Seal basically ran out of funding for their whole group, and a couple of their people had to take a hike. They quit on them. So now we're stuck with this machine, and the second home for it was UCLA. Cal State Fullerton was another home for it. So basically all we did was get back on the phone again and call around, and that was sort of it was a leftover blessing, if you will, a gift for the people to use. They had asked me to build it, design it. I did all the blueprints, everything it took to come up with the engineering on it, and Marla basically put the whole thing together, piece by piece by piece. We never knew if it would ever work. I'm trying to remember if Jim was there the day we plugged this thing in and turned it on or not.
No, I wasn't there the first time.
Weren't you?
No.
I don't remember myself who was there. I guess it was just the two of us. Well, we plugged it in the wall. We never knew if it was going to work at all. It might just blow up in our face. This was a pretty big machine. But anyway, of course it did work, luckily, thank God for that. But anyway, Cal State Fullerton wound up with a machine, and the doctor there had been using it for many, many, many years. I guess, I'm not sure now, it's been 10 years, but I got to guess it might still be in some use down there. And they were using it through all kinds of psychology type projects they had down there at the school. Anyway, it was like a baby tool, a baby thing to get it all started. And then from that, you could make more off of it, go more into research, create bigger and better ones. It was nice. There were a lot of, there were some good things that came out of this that you could take and give back without asking anything in return. And that was sort of like, I don't know, it was a way of them themselves saying to you, like, we can offer you this, but what you do with it, you can't take any, well, you can't get rich on it, let's put it that way. It'd be something that you're going to feel the goodness inside of you just from giving it away. Well, of course, this thing, well, how we're talking here, it took us almost a year to get this whole thing put together. And it was kind of sad watching it go away, but at the same time, it did make us really happy to be able to give something away that would help mankind. And that's some of the stuff. I mean, we did get a lot of thank yous for the little bit that we did do. and for the people who were involved in it and their help, and things that actually would go on afterwards, things that, well, Lignana was one of these voices that used to speak through me. A lovely little lady who eventually herself, I guess she sort of died. The emotional stuff inside of her was pretty bad. She couldn't handle a lot what was happening in the world. She'd sort of absorbed some of the emotions, took it on herself, and eventually that kind of just did her in. It was too much, some of these traumas in the end. But each of the little characters in this thing all had their own little part. It was kind of like tuning into, I don't know, it was like tuning into a satellite that has a million different channels, right? And all these channels are bringing back all this information, and then all these people are talking to each other about all this. I think they used to have fights amongst themselves on who was going to do what. It was crazy. But it was a rather abrupt ending. It surely was. We moved on to Seattle, got involved in working for McDonnell Douglas up there, building F-18s and all the flight decks. And well, after I got into this thing, I guess you could say I became a wanted list. The headhunters of America started calling me up. You know, Brian, can you come here? Brian, can you come there? Eventually, we had an offer to come back to Pennsylvania that was really hard to say no to. The money was, you know, really hard to say no to. So we moved back here. And then I wound up working directly again for Mac Air, doing the Harrier, retrofits for the F-14, the F-16. You know, everything up in the cockpit, all that design work. Well, see, the Harrier, or the AV-8B, we converted all that from normal vision to night vision, so the whole entire cockpit had to come out, and everything, panels, instrument panels, everything had to be replaced. So I wound up as director of engineering for doing all that work, and then it came time for this company to get into computer systems, and they needed a CAD so they could do their drawings better. Data submittal had to be done for the government, and little by little by little, I mean, this place hires me as a project engineer. 3 years later, I'm doing about 14 different jobs. You know, but they gave me the people to do it with and the staff, and it's nice. You know, you sort of grew with it. Well, these things really had me quite busy, I'll have to admit, trying to go back and think about what happens with all this stuff with Voltaire, the abduction, the weird things that were going on, things disappearing, people coming, people going. I mean, scientists one day, priests the next. I mean, you never knew from one day to the next. It was like a three-ring circus. It was kind of nice having a break. But this is how it sort of started. They did do some training with this, you know, to do what I had to do. I had to be able to at least put it on paper so somebody could build it. So they said, go to school. I did. You know, one day I'm a drafter. You know, well, we'll put it back. One day I'm running a punch press making $3 an hour. The next day I'm a drafter. Not that I'm getting richer, but it's a little better. But then a couple of years later, you're actually building American military fighter jets. Everything up in those cockpits. But anyway, because I did have, you know, flight deck experience, this thing just grew. Then I had another offer come along, and the next thing I knew, I was working over in Princeton, over in New Jersey, working for GE Aerospace over there, working on satellites and communication satellites and, oh boy, observers and crafts that were sent out to go to Mars, the new Mars observer that's going out. Oh, I worked on about 4 different projects, actually, Geostar, Telstar, the Mars observer, and they're doing a whole new Telstar 5 version. That's another solar-powered type guy that'll just zoom out there and keep on going. Of course, working there was kind of neat because you're involved in all the stuff and you get to feel me, see me, touch me type stuff. The GE Astra used to be RCA, and RCA was working on the shuttle. So parts of that contract were still left over, and GE had to complete that. So we had our mock-ups of the shuttle there. They have a really nice, Jim would have loved this, zero-gravity chamber. That's one of the fun things working as a project engineer. You get to go play around in the zero-gravity chamber. It's quite an interesting experience. You know, now that you've done that, you go, now you know you don't want to be out there. I mean, you know, you make sure you don't drink any coffee before you go, at least not for the first half hour. Oh, that sure gets a weird experience.
Well, can you talk about design and navigation on this one satellite?
Yeah, well, the control systems, at least for, you know, ground control, the RF communications type systems that they use, the RF boxes herself, little black box, the housings, the guidance systems, the actual electronics, and the mechanical parts of all this. You know, it's a pretty vast company out there. They have so many people doing so many different pieces of the puzzle. If you take the entire satellite, you got like maybe 1,000 people involved in this thing. I have a very small piece of the pie. You know, my contribution is like only maybe 5% of the whole entire satellite. But for what they would use in its guidance system and the RF control units and the oscillators and everything else on there, I designed all that stuff. You know, got to put it all together. I did send, well, I have drawings of most of this work I did. Not that it's all that, well, AT&T was the last project we worked on. Sure is nothing all that big of a secret. You know, just a standard old communication type satellite. But, you know, it's interesting kind of work because you're interfacing with so many different people. And, you know, they do have some government projects too. So, of course, they have those people coming and going and people asking you questions about how to do this and how to do that. And, well, like anything else man puts together, it sure falls apart fast enough. I mean, working as a designer and then working as an engineer, you go, oh, my God, you know, what a change. Because you're responsible. The responsibilities are, well, it's a lot greater. You know, when you think about that thing going out there and something going wrong, you know, there goes maybe $1 million worth of satellite or $10 million worth of satellite. Not too good. Same thing working around military aircraft. I mean, you sure hate to think that when that pilot gets in the aircraft and he pushes that button that thing won't arm because you did something wrong. You know, of course, that's why, you know, naturally all this stuff is tested out, but, you know, you do take a lot of responsibility on with it. Anyway, it just kept on going on. Every time I turn around, there'd be another phone call, somebody else. I guess once you get started with this, it's like a snowball going down the hill. They put your name into a computer system, and you know, if you're doing your work right, you know, and you get a good reputation, then after a while you get phone calls from all kinds of people wanting you to go. You know, a lot of it I have to say no to and turn down. Not, you know, at a certain point with money, you know, you're making enough where you're comfortable and you're happy. You know, I'm not looking to get that rich. Just, you know, if I can put beams in a house and put a roof over our heads, fine. Not to say that money didn't make me move a few times, because you know, with the way the world is, you need a few dollars more. You know, you'd think that these things would be really high-paying jobs, but they're not really all that high. You know, you're not up there in the $100,000 bracket, more like in the 50s. You know, that's maxed out. It really is. The economy the way it is nowadays is even harder. It's funny, the aerospace industry has taken a big nosedive anyway lately here. You know, to break out of doing F-18s, F-14s, F-16s, the Tomcats, the F-18E, the last version I worked on, all this night vision peripherals, you know, director of engineering and manager of the computer systems, and to go from all that and wind up working on spaceships. You know, it's kind of funny because 10 years later I'm working on spaceships. 10 years ago, one found me in the desert. You know, of course theirs was prettier. You know, they blatantly call a satellite a spaceship. You have to wonder about that. But if you're working on them, you know, if you're out there at GE and you're in the aerospace, aerospace division, they don't call these things satellite. To them, they're spacecrafts. They're actually there's a lot of pride in that kind of work.
Well, how did the knowledge that you got from being inside the crafts, did it help you any in seeing the inside of the UFOs?
No, not really at all. Funny enough, you couldn't imagine anything that we would do here, anything that would come close to something like what I had on that craft. I mean, that was really unique all in itself. We don't have anywhere near that type of technology. It's not there. You know, to go from all this through this, to the little bit I got out of it was the fact that they gave me something as a little bit of a blessing. At least I wasn't a complete bum. I could take what I did get out of it and go off and do something for my own life. You know, putting all this behind me and trying to forget it all ever happened in the first place is not that hard to do. You know, you don't have anybody around you, no one's pestering you about the story. Occasionally there'd be some magazines or, well, Omni magazine, you know, sometimes these stories would still come up and people would walk up to me one day, Brian, is that you that's in this magazine? It sure looks like you. Or this story sure sounds like you, or something like that. And then, of course, you kind of open a can of worms then. But, you know, I usually just play it down and say, nah, there's this crazy guy called Jim Frazier. He's always making these terrible stories up about me. You can't believe anything he says, you know. And they go, oh, really? Tell me more. And he says, well, Jim, he used to work for Steven Spielberg. Oh, really? You know, yeah, he was his right-hand man. And we'd go off and I'd bullshit him to death, you know. No, it was funny.
Well, how
True too. I used to make him.
what parts of their technology and our technology? And remember, they said you were supposed to design, and maybe look more into the camera when you're talking this time.
I'm trying to.
Does it hurt?
But she's pretty.
Yeah, she is real pretty.
I'm pretending she's giving the interview.
That's all right.
I can't even see you. I'm blinded here.
It looks
You're the guy over there making me go squint.
Can you see this red light?
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I'll glance more at it, a little bit more. But remember when they said that your end role would design the spacecrafts that left the solar system? And maybe talk about that they said that and how you feel about going from being a high school dropout and seeing their craft. The way I was telling the story to Carrie is the secondary world offered you a chance to have their knowledge and you rejected it.
Yeah.
And they offered you something like a little craft or design the knowledge of that little craft. Maybe just weave all that together and sort of wrap it up. That
Boy,
you saw
that's hard to do.
You rejected a lot of their knowledge. You chose something in Julie's home, so I don't know.
Well, maybe better wait, because I'll be stumbling and stamping and. Well, you guys not zoom in and have this ugly face.
No, I can't see the rest.
Well, I hadn't really thought about later on this afternoon. I didn't know what you're going to do, but more like take my shower, do my normal thing, shave, clean up, and put on some clothes.
We can't see it.
You know, today really went by so fast. You know, it's hard to believe the weekend's almost over. Next weekend, I get stuck with all kind of overtime. Well, this is amazing. I've been at this place. Well, see, now I'm working out at AMP out in Harrisburg. And this RF stuff and doing guidance systems and controls, in doing all this work, occasionally we use other people's products in our products. You had to kind of marry them in. Well, AMP makes a lot of different kind of connectors and RF connectors and things we use in RF housings on the space projects. So it was kind of weird to get a phone call one day from another headhunter that says, we got this lovely contract for you out in Harrisburg, you know, break even on the money, but it was going to run a while, like something that might last as much as a year. I like these one-year contracts. At least you don't have to worry about changing jobs every month or something like that. But it was sort of a different thing. You can take the challenge of going off and doing something else, but it's on a lower level. You know, I've been bounced from one level to the other in this stuff, mostly like a roller coaster. You know, it's mostly up and down. You get to touch all parts of it. Well, I was out there, so there's myself, one contractor, and me out there working, and the other guy gets laid off Friday because he doesn't ever show up for work. He's late all the time. Boss calls you in the office. He says, well, we had you on a contract and him on a contract, but he ain't there no more, so guess who gets to take over all his work? Poor me. He says, of course, that means the contract will have to be extended. So they stretch the contract out, so now I've got double the time. But then, of course, the nice part is he comes around and tells you you have unlimited overtime. Any hours you want to work. I'm going, oh, this is nice. It's a